Welcome to Enlightenment of Change on webtalkradio.com. I'm your host, Connie Whitman. You know that my guests and I are always excited that you join us weekly to hear us share our ideas, stories, strategies, whatever it is to help you change whatever change you're facing in your life. So to help you on that journey, in the show notes, I have my free gift. It's my communication style assessment. You'll get 2 reports. First report, just your natural communication superpowers. Important to know because we want to lean into that and, of course, build on strength always. The flip side, when we're communicating with people who maybe speak or communicate 180 degrees different than us, how is your message landing there? To me, that is the more probably impactful report. So read both with a keen eye. Again, that lowest score result is probably your biggest blind spot. Again, my gift to you, and I hope it helps you change whatever you're changing in your life with a little bit more ease and grace. Now, the quote I chose today to set the stage for my guests and my conversation is by Karen Salmansohn. I think I said that right. And she says, if a door closes, quit banging on it. Whatever was behind it was not meant for you. Consider that perhaps the door was locked because you're worth so much more than what was on the other side. So I really chose this quote because I know I feel this way so often, right? The door closes, something ends, and I'll sit there and ponder, did I do something wrong? Did I cause this change? What's going on? The change could be good, could be bad, doesn't really matter. The end result is when those doors do close, we have to stop banging on them and think of the next possible step forward. Good or bad, right or wrong, doesn't really matter either. And I personally love this quote to share because I know most of you have heard the phrase, the universe is always conspiring in our favor. I really do find comfort in knowing that the future is hopefully better and bigger than my little pea brain could imagine today. So this is just such a cool topic, and I'm excited to have my guest on, Cynthia Rivard. She's on for the second show. We're going to dig a little bit deeper in our last conversation. And of course, I'm going to put that link in the show notes for you so you could go back and watch. And then, of course, listen to this show as well. We're going to get really deep today. So who is Cynthia? Cynthia is a spiritual teacher, seeker, environmental advocate, and author. Now, through a I can never say this, meteoric up-leveling of channeling skills, Cynthia has become a crystal clear seer for awakening humanity to the next chapter of its evolution. Raising consciousness and saving humanity from extinction due to the effects of climate change are the first priority, which she illuminates in her book, Hope for a New Era, Turning the Tide, Love and Leadership Through Turbulent Times. So, Cynthia, thank you so much for being on for our second show. Yay, yay.
I am so excited to be back. We had such a great conversation last time, but I think we could have gone all day. And I will try and be a little more concise this time so we can get through everything.
You know, Cynthia, you're so funny. And I so appreciate that because, right, we want to show up, we want to give good content, and we want the listeners to walk away with some really good, solid action steps. So I love that. And that's why I actually asked you back on. Topic is so cool. I think you're an expert in this, again, in what we're going to talk about today. But I also think you care about people and coming up with those really key action steps so that we can change our lives, whatever that means for the listeners, right? Because we're all at different points or stages in life.
Absolutely.
So let's jump in, right? The first question is, what advice would you give to people who are struggling with overwhelm, or where should they start when they're experiencing this chaos and everything that's happening in the world right now? It's noise. There's so much noise.
Yeah. So there's a few ways I could go with this. One thing that could be causing overwhelm is fear of change. And we're going to talk about that a little later, I think, when we talk about resistance and our instinctual programs. But the other thing, this bombardment of chaos and friction out there that we're seeing also causes us to freeze and to become overwhelmed. And we either hide our heads or we get into analysis paralysis. Well, what can I do?
Yeah.
And I may have shared this last time, but I love to talk about the definition of hope because we have to have hope. We can't give up. We have to be beacons of hope. And hope is faith in action. So, of course, as a spiritual teacher, I have faith in a greater power and the wisdom that comes to me. But that, if you don't believe in a greater power, it could be faith in yourself or in your community coming together to create a better world. It doesn't matter, but we have to have hope in something, or faith rather, in something, and then take action. Hope is faith in action. And it's not until we take any kind of action that we create hope and feel more empowered. And the more empowered you feel, the more inspired you'll feel to take more action. So I like to get into the topic of leadership, which I have a feeling a lot of people in your audience consider themselves to be leaders already.
Absolutely.
So let's expand this a little bit. I want to point out, first of all, that most of the world, most of the people do not see themselves as leaders. So if you happen, because of conditioning and the way you were brought up, to not consider yourself to be a leader because no one gave you a title, I just want to point out that leadership is merely our ability to positively influence others. And every single person listening, and both of us, have an ability to influence others. It may not even be intentional, but you have influence. And then once you recognize that, you can take it the next step, being intentional in it, and then looking beyond that and seeing the possibilities in all the people around you who also have influence and may not see themselves as leaders. You don't have to have a title. We influence our families, our friends, our coworkers, our community members. We can all do it, but if we're intentional, we can start that ripple effect. We can show up in a more positive way and inspire others to do the same.
It's so interesting because we don't think we have power unless we have a title. Again, I think it's just, us coming up through corporate. That's,
Mhm.
you're not important unless you have a title. I need the VP title so people take me seriously.
Yep.
It's this whole image. And I remember, oh my gosh, years ago, I was a financial advisor and I worked in a bank, and one of my branches, there was this young man going to school, part-time, working full-time to pay for it. And whenever he was on, it was a teller, right? So it was
Mhm.
transactional, doing the processing. Whenever he was there, the energy in that branch was unbelievable. And I remember I commented to the manager and said, "This kid is tremendous." And I used the word leader. I said, "He's a leader behind that." He was a kid. He's behind that. She goes, "Well, he's only a teller." And I said, that's so wrong. I said that,
Yep.
yes, okay, he's putting himself through school. It's an entry level position, but that's what he needed, right, to pay for school. I said, but this kid's got skill. Watch him. I said, when he's not here, the energy in this branch is different. When he's there, look at the engagement with the customers. That's leadership in action. And I said, he doesn't even realize it. I said, you should be coaching him, because when he does graduate with the degree, why aren't we bringing him on, hopefully to be a vice president at some point and give him the title? But he's earning it now as a kid. So
Yeah.
we diminish our value based on a job title. Job isn't
Right.
who you are, right?
Right.
Leadership is that we ooze it to try to inspire others. And I love that word, inspire.
And it's really important to see, even if you are a leader at work,
Mm.
that your influence goes well beyond work. Everywhere that you interact with others. And I love that example, Connie, because we lead with our energy first. So how you, even if you don't get into a conversation with someone, if you're showing up with that positive energy, intentionally sharing a smile, making eye contact,
Yeah.
you really will change someone's moment, if not their day. You have a positive influence. And of course, it goes well beyond that when we're intentional and we're talking to people, but there's so many ways we can influence without a title.
It's so true, and it's funny. I remember when I was a regional sales manager again at the same, bank, got promoted
Mhm.
through the years, and I was a senior vice president. So I had a team under me, I have a large team, but I would still go into the branches. I would go over to the tellers, and I knew every name of every employee, and I'd say, "Hey, how's your daughter? I know she's taking skating
Mm.
lessons." And I was very personal with them. And years later, it was 20 years later, I was at a diner with a friend. And this woman passes, I couldn't remember her name, Cynthia, but I knew her face and I knew the branch she was in, which was so funny. And she said to my friend, "She's amazing." And my friend says, "Well, I know that, but why do you think she's amazing?" I'm blushing, getting very, guys, stop it, right? But you love hearing it just the
Yeah.
same. But anyway, she said, I was a teller at the time. And she said, "Connie, you had title, you were, our regional." And she goes, "And you would leave. And most time when the suits, quote unquote, right, when the suits came
Yeah.
in, it was like, oh, jump to attention. You came in and we felt fun. We felt energized. We felt seen. We wanted to work hard for you because you showed up for us."
Mm.
And can I tell you, I got teary eyed and I said, "Oh my gosh." Now, here's the thing. For me, I guess it was a natural because
Yeah.
people matter to me. I didn't think I was inspiring or leading. I came in because I cared. And that
Right.
there was that ripple effect that you talk about,
Yeah.
that they showed up bigger and better because they knew our region was important, right? They knew that I wanted to always be number one and spotlight them. So they rallied behind me, because I think I was intentional in how I led, not intentional, like, "Oh, if I'm nice to them, they're going to show up for me." That
Right.
never entered my mind.
Right.
So I think there's if you love people, I think the leadership becomes a little bit easier. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, you have a very outgoing personality, so it is probably easier for you than a lot of
Agree.
people who may be listening to
I
this
agree I
and are a
agree.
little uncomfortable talking to people they don't know that well. But your energy, the friendliness, the eye contact can still make a difference, even if you're not the first one to start the conversation.
Yeah.
And it does make a difference. You made another really great point in that example. Everyone wants to be seen and feel like they're heard.
Yeah.
And so often we're trying to fight for our opinions. We'll talk about the fight instinct in a minute, I'm sure, but
Yes, that's my next question. Yeah, the
we're
survival instinct. Yeah.
we're trying to be right. Ego can get in the way. We're trying to make a point. We're not listening and letting that other person know they're valued. Even if we don't agree with the point they're making, we make an attempt to hear them, listen, and let them know they matter as a human. They matter to us, even if we have different views on the topic.
And it's
So important.
okay, right? But Cynthia, it's okay to not agree. I can't
Yeah.
tell you the number of times in my week I'll be, training, and one of the employees or students will say to me, "Well, Kana, I don't like doing it that way. I prefer doing it this way." And I say, "There's no right or wrong answer here. You can't be me. I can't be you. I'm trying to give you the container, right?
Mhm.
This is how you have to navigate, but you can't use my words. I'm a 63-year-old woman. You're a 25-year-old guy, right?
Yeah.
So
It
take
wouldn't
the
sound right.
container, right? It would be weird. So take your energy, your voice, your 25-year-old vocabulary, but
Mhm.
this is what you have to accomplish. So let's agree to disagree, that my way is going to work with your words, right? With the essence of you mixed into
Mhm.
that. So you have to agree to disagree. I never tell anyone you got to do it my way because my way is the right way. That's very ignorant and very short-sighted,
Mhm.
because right through the conflicts, the conflicting or opposing views is where innovation happens. That's where we grow and create better, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely.
Now, let's dig into the debilitating survival instinct, that the human conditions, we're always, when these conflicts that were just happening, or we talk about happening, we scream at each other thinking you're going to hear me. We don't hear screaming, by the way,
Yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
how do
Shuts
we,
everything down.
how can we get past that survival instinct? What do we need to look out or look for?
So, well, first of all, you have to recognize that a lot of the chaos we see around around us, is survival instincts playing out,
Mm.
but they don't have to be. It's just an automatic response. And when you recognize it, In yourself, you can choose differently easily. As soon as you create the awareness,
Mm,
you can choose a different behavior or action or thought about something.
mm,
But then the really potent thing about this is once you recognize it in yourself, you can recognize those debilitating responses in others, and you may not be able to control them or change them, but it helps you foster compassion in yourself for what's creating what seems like a crazy reaction or something that just doesn't make sense or is logical, an overreaction. We can have a lot more compassion once we understand this instinctual response. So the most common one that we see all the time, just, I mean, even in your own life, if you've got a big goal you're trying to work through, we have what people refer to as resistance come up, and we don't know what's causing it. You could be stuck in analysis paralysis or overwhelm or procrastination. There's a
mm,
lot of things, but typically what's causing it is the fear response, even if it doesn't feel like fear. And it's the same thing that's causing so many people in our society right now, with so much chaos going on around the world, when we talk about climate change, or within countries. If you look at the political climate, a
yeah.
lot of people are very disengaged, more so even than the combative personalities. Most are disengaged, and that's the freeze response,
Mm,
because it's chaotic, and we go into this fear response and we try and shut it out. We hide our heads in the sand, or we just avoid the news, which isn't bad sometimes because there's a lot of stress involved in watching what's going on. I'm not saying that, but there's this conditioning to avoid, deny that it's true, and to just avoid it and not think about it and think it'll just go away. It'll heal itself. It's not that bad. People are exaggerating without doing, I mean, that does happen, but without doing the research, they freeze and they hide. And then the other response is the fight response, which is people, when we're backed into a corner or we're fearful that change is coming,
mm,
the thing that people want to fight for most are their beliefs. People
mm,
go to wars for their beliefs. So
mm,
that's a big part. When you look at the shouting going on social media, a big part of it is people fighting for their beliefs because they feel threatened
mm,
by the other beliefs.
mm,
So when you recognize any of that, if you recognize in yourself that you want to argue about something, but you haven't actually stopped and listened first and tried to understand that other person, recognize that as this instinctual response and just try and get yourself to pause and listen. Just because you listen and try and understand them does not mean you agree with them.
exactly right.
And that is what's missing in a lot of the conversations going on these contentious topics. People aren't listening first. And when you listen, it helps the other person feel seen and heard, and it helps them let go of some of their resistance to you and listening to you and your points. But you, or meaning each of us, has to start that by being calm and being compassionate and trying to listen and understand first.
And that's hard because when someone is screaming at you because they feel you're not hearing them, even though you are hearing what they're saying, they don't let you get that word in edgewise. So
Mm,
the stress level goes up because you're thinking, I'm trying to be all the things you just said, I'm
yeah.
trying, and they are so combative that there's no handling this. There's no reducing the energy, right? That negative energy,
Mhm.
that toxic energy that's building. Sometimes we have to walk away, right?
Yeah,
Just because
yeah,
maybe the timing is off to have that particular conversation with that person. What do
yeah.
you think?
Well, I think the first thing we can all do in a situation like that, if you've been practicing your emotional regulation, which is emotional intelligence, practicing staying calm no matter what is going on around you, what somebody's doing that you don't agree with or approve, what they're saying. If you've practiced staying calm, and it really isn't hard once you build the awareness, it's a habit. When you are calm and you let the other person vent, again, I learned this, no one taught me, but I learned it quickly in the service industry. When you're getting yelled at by a customer, and the customer's not always right, but you have to let them think they are for a little bit, let them vent. Once they've run out of steam, they kind of, they're out of steam, and they'll stop and they'll look at you, because the next step is somebody else has to talk. Someone else has to offer a solution. And depending on the circumstance, you may not feel like it's the right time to offer your opinion on a topic because that person isn't ready to hear it. But
Absolutely.
just from the fact that you had the conversation and you asked them questions and you listened and you heard them, you're starting to lower the resistance that they have to engaging with you on the topic. They feel a little safer, even if they think you're one of those people on the wacko other side of an argument. They
Yeah.
feel a little safer sharing with you because they felt heard and seen.
Do you find it more challenging with personal relationships than professional to be able to remain this level? Because I'm thinking of a situation personally that I went off the rails and I was really trying to pause all the things we're talking about.
Mhm.
Charged me and I went off the rails. It was not okay. And I did walk
Mhm.
away. I ended up walking away because I thought, okay, this is now we're hurting each other.
Yeah.
What are we doing? That is never, ever okay with me, right? To cause harm verbally or otherwise. So is it harder? Because for
Thank you for
it is.
being so transparent, sharing that. And I will reiterate with you, absolutely. I was so good at this in my professional life for years
Hmm.
before I even knew what emotional intelligence was.
Hmm.
From being in the service industry and being a leader, I was so good at this at work. But when you get home and you feel safe and you're tired, first of all, because you've had your guard up and you've been good
That's
all
right.
day,
That's
and you
right.
just want to relax, and somebody isn't, whatever,
Cooperating.
doing whatever, it's so much easier to well, it's so much harder. It's so much easier to just you let down your defenses, meaning your guard and your it takes energy sometimes to manage your thoughts and your emotions when it's not always habitual. It can become a habit, but it can take some energy. And if someone you love and are close to really disappoints you, or you've had that same conversation 15 times and you've just had it I think it's a lot harder to manage the emotional.
Regulation.
it, it's very easy to become emotional because you are safe and you're with someone you love and you're disappointed and you just get emotional.
Yeah.
But if we cannot get emotional, we will manage the situation and quite often move through it um, more to our gain if we're able to not get as emotional. And again, it's a practice. but
Yeah.
it's great to notice. One of the things I talk about is recognizing your triggers,
Yeah.
where it's possible. What is it that sets you off? And when I was working on this, the first place was my husband. I knew that there was a multitude of different ways, but that was what I needed to work on. So recognizing what it is and then why it's making you emotional. Well, it's because it's something you can't control. You
Yeah.
don't approve of their words, their behavior, their lack of action, whatever it is. And I'm
Yeah.
not just husband bashing because,
Yeah.
it's everybody in relationships.
Yeah.
Um, there's something you can't control, and you're allowing it to upset you, probably because you're taking it personally.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, well, he's really bad at managing his time, and so he's always late, I might think, well, he doesn't care enough about me to respect my time and be here on time.
Absolutely. It's funny. My husband and I have these conversations all the time. What we take personally isn't
Mhm,
isn't about us at all. It's they're in their own head or they're
mhm.
debilitating, right, themselves. But this is true with all relationships. This is
Yes,
true at work, right? People
yes,
don't verbalize, they're afraid to take that next step because what if I disappoint you? But it's not, they're not doing it to annoy us. They're not doing it or moving because they're afraid of, right, disappointing us or not being able to do it, even though we're giving someone the opportunity.
right.
Humans, we are complicated, man. So my last question, because this I think will wrap it up for us so that you could give a little advice. We've covered a lot, right? And we covered a
Yes.
lot in the last show as well. So when we talk about applying this, it's a lot. It's a lot of information, and
Mhm.
people are going, yeah, but what? What about this? What about this? What's the best way for people really to get started and applying something that we discussed today? So you pick what's when you work with your clients, what's the big your first step, if you will, to help them manage the overwhelm?
Okay, well, depending on what your goal is, the first step is always awareness. So if you're trying to get something done, but you're trying to do something, but you're feeling overwhelmed, build awareness. Notice that that's what's going on that's keeping you in action is number one, because once you recognize it, you can choose differently. The second thing, because this resistance, a lot of times we experience resistance or fear when we're trying to do something that's way out of our comfort zone.
Yes.
And the best way to move forward with that is to chunk it way down to the smallest micro action you can take.
Yeah.
Because, it's like, I love this analogy of someone that's afraid of the water. You're not going to jump off the diving board into the deep end, or I would advise against that. I wouldn't do that. You would start maybe just by sitting by the water. That's your first step. And then you might move a little closer and dip your toe in or your fingers in, and you build up to acclimating to, and getting past that fear. When you start with little micro actions, you are letting your subconscious know that you can be this person. You're moving forward on that goal, and the resistance starts to dissipate. But first, you have to start taking action. You can't just think your way into being that person and doing those grand things. You have to start, but start really small, and
Yeah.
then just keep reevaluating and building and taking another step.
And see, this is interesting. It just popped into my head. We had gone, my family, my husband and I took the kids on a cruise, and we did a speedboat excursion, and we were scuba diving, not scuba diving, snorkeling. And
Uh-huh.
I'm very claustrophobic. So they give us the fins, they give us the mask, the whole thing. And I'm one of the last ones to jump in the water. I'm not afraid of water at all. Love it. Right. And I say to the guy, oh, I don't need the mask. And he looks at me puzzled. He goes, how are you going to see anything? I said, oh, I don't mind keeping my eyes open underwater. The salt water won't hurt me. I'm
Uh-huh.
cool with it. He goes, but you're not going to see anything. I said, no, I'm claustrophobic. And my husband is laughing. I'm like, I can't breathe through that snorkel thing. So he goes, I think you better take it with you. I go, you know what? Just give it to me. I'll take it with me. So I put the fins on. We jump in the water.
Uh-huh.
And my husband's like, you got to put I go, I'm not putting the goggles on. I'm claustrophobic. You know, this is freaking me out already. I just want to look underwater at my own eyes. And so now I'm getting a little bit anxious with him.
Yeah.
So I said, go with the kids. I'll catch up. Like, just leave me alone. Let me figure this out. So I thought, you're being a baby. So I thought, you know what? Don't put the goggles on with the snorkel. Hold them in your hand, but hold them up to your head. Put the snorkel in your mouth. Put your head in the water for 3 seconds. Just do 3 seconds.
Oh.
And I did 3 seconds. And then I said, all right, now kick and do 4 seconds. And I counted 4 seconds. Well, lo and behold, I caught up to them. I had the snorkel on, and my husband looked at me and I go, it was a process. Just leave me alone and don't criticize me right now with the water. The kids are, I have to tell you, thank God I did that. It was one of the most memorable experiences
Mm.
of my life to see, because I love the water. So to see that
Yeah.
I couldn't see Jack poop without the thing on my head. So the guy thought I was a lunatic, and I did build. And when I went back, he goes, so did you? And I go, yes, I used the thing. And, and he laughed at me, but I got up to where I could keep it on and do the snorkeling like everybody else was doing. It was a process. I
Yes.
had to understand that I could breathe underwater. That was my biggest
Yeah.
issue. And that claustrophobic on my face, I was safe. And that's all I had to prove to myself.
Wow, that is such a great example of what I was just talking about, little by little. And can I also just say that if you had chosen not to baby step into that, you would probably, or someone, maybe not you, but a lot of us would beat ourselves up afterward. Boy, that sounds like a great opportunity I just missed because
Yes.
I wimped out. I've done that before. I don't think I do that anymore because I've learned all of these tricks, but
Yeah.
I've done it. And it doesn't feel good when you look back and think, I was scared. I
Yeah.
didn't, or I, whatever it was, I passed up that opportunity because it took me out of my comfort zone and I was
Yeah.
scared.
Yeah.
When the fact is, and I think maybe people talk about this more now, but as I was growing up and, a young professional, I'd never heard of self-development and I'd never heard people talking about being scared of anything. I
Yeah.
just thought I was a wuss.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just didn't talk about it, but I would sit there and beat myself up.
After the fact.
Yeah.
But this happens all the time, both in our personal and our professional life. So I love that
Mm.
tip. Here's the call to action, everybody. No matter what you're afraid of. So again, right, I didn't just put the mask on and say, suck it up and figure out how to breathe. I had to do those little micro steps to build my confidence that I would, in fact, be able to breathe underwater and not. I kept thinking I was going to gobble water up, right? Because I had never
Mhm.
used a snorkel before. Once it's that the muscle memory. Once my
Mhm.
body learned and understood what to do, the fear was gone and pure joy, was replaced. But how many times, and that's such a good, that's why when you said it, I was thinking that
Mhm.
since that point, I've really tried when I'm afraid and think, I can't do that. There's no way, I'm too big. I'm
Mhm.
whatever it is, I'm too old to do that. I think, well, let me give it a shot. And if I don't like it, I'm just going to say, I'm not going to do it. You guys continue on. And I'm pulling out, right? There's always an exit strategy. So that I think that helps. You're not forced to do anything in life. So there's always an
Right.
exit strategy based on your boundaries. But
Right.
to not try, I think is dangerous, because it holds us back. Exactly what you're saying. But it's
And
hard. This is hard stuff.
and recognize that quite often adults don't recognize it as fear. Our subconscious is
Mm,
really good about keeping us safe, and it will come up with things like, I'm too busy. I'm really too busy to start going back to the gym. I'm just too busy, and when you hear something often enough, even if you're just talking to yourself, you start to believe it is true when it really isn't true.
yeah.
So recognize, resistance doesn't just come up as fear. It
Yeah.
comes up as procrastination. I don't know why. I just can't get my mojo back.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably something that's a little out of your comfort zone that your subconscious is resisting. Just take a
Absolutely.
small action.
Yep. Baby step. That's,
Yeah.
I love that because I do think with baby steps, we could take giant steps. It just takes time. So,
Yeah.
I love it. Now you have a book, A New Breed of Leader.
Yes.
Can they get that? I'm going to give with the website, all of that I'm going to share in a second. But that'll be on the website as well.
There, yes, you can learn about it, and there will be links on my website, because what we covered on this conversation is more of what I talk about in that book, A New Breed of Leader. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I think that we're blending worlds now because our personal development absolutely impacts our professional development. Because, oh, yes, that's right. We're one human playing in all these different roles in life. So I love that book. So again, the title of the book is A New Breed of Leader. I will put Cynthia's website, which is cynthiarivard.com. I'll put that in the show notes. Additionally, I just want to share, and I've shared this in the last episode as well. I will put the other podcast episode, was a couple of weeks ago. Please listen to that. We talked about other things as well, more tools, more action steps for you. Additionally, I'm including Cynthia's YouTube channel. You have a ton of stuff on YouTube. There's two specific links I'm going to put. One is the plain YouTube channel, I think, the global the
Yes.
globe, yeah. And the other one is the training. So I'll label them accordingly. And you do have a gift, which is globalrisingtide.org. And I'll put the free resource link. Can you tell everybody what they get and what to expect on the YouTube? That'll be helpful.
Well, the link, the training on YouTube is about why and how to develop your intuition or inner wisdom. And we talked more about that on the last episode, but truly, this is the skill that just keeps giving. You really, most people have it a little bit, but they don't recognize it as a skill to develop and guide them throughout their lives. Highly, highly recommend you check out that free video on YouTube to learn more about that if you have not or feel at all curious about developing your intuition.
I love it. And we're going to give free resource. There's other free gifts on the website as well. So I'll put that link in there. Ton of stuff for you guys to explore and look at. So here's the call to action. Again, we talked about a couple of strategies. Cynthia at the end, right before I gave her credentials, if you will, she gave us some good action steps. But for me, this is the easiest one. Go and do that free training. It's quick, it's easy, it's on the YouTube link. Do it because that might give you the spark that you need to take that baby step forward so that we can help ourselves make those giant leaps in our life, both professionally as well as personally. So, and please listen to the other episode as well. Cynthia was brilliant in that episode too. My friend, thank you for being on and sharing again. I think this is an important topic because if we could identify change, identify what's happening in the world, it's not against us. And that if we can take a couple of breaths and really engage with people and engage in a kind way, not screaming at each other, I really believe we can change the world together because those opposing views are critical for us to come up with the best for innovations, the best systems, whatever it might be. Having opposing views isn't bad. It's actually a good thing as long as we stop and listen. So again,
Absolutely.
you have a ton
Yep.
of call to actions that Cynthia and I shared. Easy peasy. Go through those links. Buy the book if you're a reader. Buy the book. I think it could be very life changing for you. So Cynthia, as always, thank you for sharing great information, for sharing so many beautiful gifts with my listeners. There's no excuse for us not to want to change, and you've made it easy for my listeners to do that. So thank you so much for just showing up for us.
Such a joy to be here with you again, Connie.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I love
Yeah.
chatting with you.
Yeah, back at you, Cynthia. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope you will join me weekly as we question, build, and discover no matter where you are in change in your life, whatever it is, personal or professional. My guests and I, we understand we're going through it too. And we hope that we bring inspiration, strategy, ideas, and of course, downloadable things to make your change easier. Again, whatever you're facing in life. So Cynthia, thank you again. Thank you all for tuning in to Enlightenment of Change with me, your host, Connie Whitman, on webtalkradio.com. I am truly inspired that you show up every week, and the numbers grow and the ratings rise, and that just really fills my heart with so much joy. So thank you for being along on the ride with us on Enlightenment of Change. I love you all. I'll see you next week. Have a great one, everyone. Thanks again. Bye.